excited to be here today and to talk about riparian corridors. And I just want to give, as we start, a shout out to Dr. Jennifer Fulstead-Shaw and to Soren Simonson. They are the ones that brought me into this conversation about riparian corridors, and so I thank them. And then today on our panel, we have Mike West from Lehi. And we're going to let each one of us introduce ourselves. So I'll start. I'm Lynn Bennion. I serve in the Utah House of Representatives, and I represent District 41. And that includes Cottonwood Heights. It includes both Big and Little Cottonwood Canyon. It's a big responsibility I feel. And parts of Midvale, Murray, and Holiday are also in our district.
Yeah, I'm Mike West. I'm the planning manager down Lehi City. Been there for about 12 years now. So we've got a whole lot of challenges on our hands. And one of the big ones is we got so much growth, and especially when it relates to our riparian corridors, there's a lot of challenge to that. So we've tried to take some steps, though not perfect, to help with that. But yeah, one of the many things that we deal with. So.
Hi, I'm Mike Guymon. I'm with Salt Lake City Public Utilities. I'm the stormwater capital improvements engineer there. And we have a lot of folks from public utilities here, so maybe I'll just be deferring to their expertise today.
Okay, so we're just going to have a discussion. I'll start out with some questions, and as you have questions, you can raise your hands too. And we're going to be talking about the benefits of riparian corridor planning, because these are both two cities that have done the work of looking at their riparian corridors and putting that plan into their general plan of what their vision is for their riparian corridors. And if you probably have heard, I am the sponsor of legislation to make this mandatory for all cities and counties within the next 5 years to get their own vision of what their riparian corridors should be. And it has support from the state to help them through that. So one of the questions that we've had a working group, and I've gotten to know Mike West pretty well. We're missing Justin Anderson. He has COVID. He's the person that led the effort in Ogden to restore their rivers, which you saw in the last presentation how incredible the work was that they did. So I wonder if each of you could talk about obstacles that you overcame, especially Mike West, who was there when you created the riparian corridors. What obstacles did you face? And for Mike, what obstacles you might still be facing?
Yeah, one of the biggest things is we actually, we saw the need for doing something around the Jordan River, so that was our first focus. But we kind of went at it and said, here's a draft ordinance. This sounds great. Let's take it forward to the Planning Commission. But when we're at the Planning Commission, I will say, luckily, one of the property owners along the river happened to be at the meeting. He's like, I haven't heard about this before. So I was a little bit younger in my planning years at the time, so it was definitely a good lesson to learn for me. But it's always good to have the public process, and work with everyone. So that was definitely a strong lesson on that. But they were there like, hey, whoa, this is, what are you doing to our property rights? Got a lot going on here. So we held back, said, okay, let's go through a process. We reached out, the best we could to every single property owner along the river. There were some fairly large property owners too, so they took up quite a bit of it. But really what we were after is, development is just going so fast in Lehi, and honestly it's, growth unchecked can lead to a lot of negative externalities. So we want to look at how can we do growth in a way that also respects this corridor. So we wanted to ensure, at the time, the Jordan River Blueprint suggested 300 foot should be, a buffer area around the river. So at first we were going for that, but through the whole process, I will say we did hold a public meeting, invited everybody to come out. We had all kinds of tomatoes thrown at me and my director, like, how could you guys possibly do this to us? The government's crazy. Anyway, so trying to, so we had to do a really good listening session with that, and we said, look, we want to meet with each one of you individually and go over this. So we want to respect property rights, but we also have a goal along this corridor to limit development from getting too close, because there's a lot of negative impacts. There's been places in Lehi where it has been too close before we started this work, and we didn't want to continue to see that along the river. So But yeah, we did. We met with each one of them one by one. We listened to their concerns, and we tried to, craft the ordinance in such a way that it's accommodating a lot of things that they were after. 'Cause some of it was some people wanted an outdoor amphitheater along the river, but they saw this ordinance as something that would prevent that. So, there are some uses that can work within this and be, cohesive with the overall vision. So, really, worked with them one by one, and at the end of the day, when it went back to Planning Commission, we had a bunch more people come back out again, but this time they all said, this is great, they worked with us, and the Planning Commissioner chair was like, I've never had this happen before, where the public was out coming in favor or something. So at the end of the day, we learned a strong lesson. Let's sit down and work with them. Every corridor is going to be different, every property owner is going to be different. Some of the property owners, and we saw this coming, had sold since then, and now master plan communities and things have come in. But now some of them have been built in a way, and they've gone far beyond the 300-foot open space. There's actually a swath along the Jordan River that'll be preserved that you can go half a mile without hitting housing in that one section. So it's actually ultimately ended up being a better ordinance in the long run. I know it's not perfect still. There's a lot we need to improve on it to fix any of the damage that had been done up to that point. But strong lesson in working with them and really trying to figure out what are people really after. They want to be heard. Really understanding how to do development in a way that can happen according to their property rights, but also respect and acknowledge the corridor.
So the Salt Lake City Riparian Corridor Ordinance and Overlay District was first codified in 2008, just based off of some growing pressures of development in the city. And really the two main challenges that we continue to work with is the desire to upgrade properties that lie within that corridor and how to enforce what's written in code. In all phases of being in the riparian corridor, whether it's starting from planning all the way through redevelopment. So it's a challenge.
Okay. Another question is, there are economic benefits to having riparian corridors. Do you guys want to talk about those?
It really is a guidance document, among other things, of what type of development we would like to see within the riparian corridor. Our riparian ordinance is not a closed door, and it allows for development that is friendly to and that gives back to the riparian corridor. Obviously, it's a closed door if you want to do certain things in the riparian corridor, like build a huge mansion right there. But there are properties that are grandfathered in as virtue of the code's writing. So that being said, because it does guide development and work within the riparian corridor, we've started to see some really good work within the riparian corridor. That, case in point, I think someone referred to yesterday, the Allen Park. There is some aspiration, different types of aspirations of what could happen there, and because of our riparian ordinance, we could. And this morning, I wasn't able to participate because I was on a technical advisory committee for what's happening in Allen Park. And there's going to be some fantastic work here henceforth on the Jordan River within the city boundaries. And so, and just from there's something restorative about our riparian corridors that people need and want, and it really is that third place that people are really hungering for. And so we need that in the city, we need that everywhere in Utah, and so the more that we can bring folks to the corridor, the better.
Yeah, for me, it's maybe a bit of an indirect answer, I guess, economically, but kind of what we look at in Lehi is we really want to, well, and there's a balance to it, ensuring, quality natural area, but we want to create a place in Lehi that has a high quality of life. So in the long term, we want to create a place that it's somewhere people want to live, not just have to live. So if it's somewhere you want to live, over time it's going to, be a longer lasting place and economically continue to be stronger in that sense. So if you create a place people want to be, and I think so many cities in the United States have lost access to nature and recreation, and that's such an important thing for cities to be thinking about. And even as these developments have been coming along near the river, you can see so many of them, the developers, they're advertising, hey, we're by the Jordan River Trail, and you can just see all this interest in people wanting to be near that kind of an amenity. So, but yeah, I won't pick on any specific cities in other states, but some cities you can go to, it's just endless suburban sprawl. There's nowhere to get out and have a moment of respite. I want my daughter to be able to go down the trail and see, understand plants and habitats and, the birds in there. So it's something that's a really valuable resource for us, and I think that can also even drive, economics for a place if you make it a good place people want to be.
And I'll just share that as I've been learning about this, Envision Utah did a survey of urban Utahns and found that 75% of urban Utahns want trails, they want connection to nature and riparian corridors and streams in their neighborhoods, in their cities. So this is something the public wants, and this is also part of Governor Cox's coordinated action plan for water, to have this protection and enjoyment of our riparian corridors. And I'll just ask one more question, and then we'll open it up to anybody here that has questions. Do you see any connection between your work in riparian corridors and water quality?
Yeah, I can go first. Yeah, one thing we look at, especially with development getting too close to the river, you got people using fertilizers and all kinds of other stuff on their lawns. So, humans in general, we tend to make a mess of things. So if we can, limit, where people's homes and businesses are from the river, that's going to have an effect on that. But some things we're looking at too is, is there a way to utilize, bioswales and other features to filter water and pollutants out before it reaches the river. And I'm not an engineer, so I can't speak too much technically about that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, we're trying to create this space that can, really buffer, people where they live and businesses from being too close there. So.
Yeah, we have a list of so many BMPs, like structural BMPs, that we can implement to improve water quality. But I'll still tell you at the end of the day that one of probably the best BMP that you can utilize is just awareness of the general public and having a tie to our water bodies and a relationship to them. And some of our staunchest supporters of a healthy and vibrant riparian water environment in the state are folks who've been duck hunting their entire lives, and just folks that aren't generally right there to install a BMP, like a structural BMP, but they get it. And if you can create that connection, and that's what the riparian ordinance is all about, is creating a space so that people can connect to their water body.
And I'm going to be the ignorant citizen. So what is a BMP?
Best management practices.
Okay, all right.
And we're going down a horrible slippery slide there, of what we're going to call them. So.
Okay. Do any of you have questions for these experts?
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Who starts the plan and the look and the view and the movement to evaluate and set up goals and care for waterways in a city structure? So who kicked it off in Lehi?
In Lehi, it was me, so I was like,
Okay.
we should do this. But every city could be different. You might have residents in some cities that feel strongly about it. Sometimes the city staff. But
And then they go to the city council?
yeah, they can bring their issues up. Every council meeting, we have a 20-minute citizen input,
Right.
so we hear all kinds of issues coming up. But for Lehi specifically, it was myself who really wanted to make this happen.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Hi, I just had a question about sort of like the hidden waterways, especially in like Salt Lake City. I live right near Emigration Creek, and it just like disappears for a bit. I was wondering if maybe like the planning bill or you guys' cities at all had any plans to restore some of those underground riparian areas.
There's fantastic work by many stakeholders within Salt Lake City to look and identify and prioritize various daylighting efforts. And there's multiple ways to do it. And back to your question, like who starts? Well, I think one of the reasons why we're all here is because water requires a lot of collaboration. There's tons of stakeholders, and it's sure there are rock stars who really do fantastic work to move things forward, but it's a community, and there's always looks at ways to bring those streams to grade. There's an effort right now looking at the Folsom Corridor, which is and there's different ways to daylight creeks. That's looking at more of just like a cultural daylighting of sorts. It's just like, hey, this is here. It doesn't go poof once it goes in a pipe, and that there's consequences for that kind of thing. And then there's other things that we're just hitting the ground running as far as like what's our next step as far as restoring those ecosystem services to experience and be a part of. So, yeah, totally.
Two comments. One, back to the question about our rivers that are like immigration that disappears. There's a wonderful organization. Is it Seven Canyons Trust? Brian Tonetti is the director. And I've always been so impressed with him because right out of college, he devised this goal that in 100 years, all those underground rivers would be up so we could enjoy them, which I just think is such a grand goal. And in order to accomplish that vision, what he does is he'll go to an area where it looks like it's possible to have that happen, and then they'll do art projects. So the residents can envision what it would be like if the water was flowing right along this sidewalk. And so you can really see what it could be. And they've done several of those projects. That's how Folsom got completed. So I would encourage you to support that organization. I think they're doing really great work. And then my second comment is, it seems like it was Lehi. It could have been Saratoga Springs, but they were going to create a project where they were going to encourage a developer to turn the homes so they faced the water instead of backed it. Did that happen, and did it work?
So in our Jordan River overlay zone, we have some requirements for that and some houses have. Previous houses backed it, but some new ones actually have houses that front towards it. What they did though is they put a kind of a street along it, and then the houses fronted the street. We wanted to have kind of that open public kind of visibility and accessibility. I don't know if I want to get streets too close to the water either. But yeah, we have done some of that in Lehi, and that's kind of built into our zone. Part of the trade-off, I guess, we've done with some of the property owners is we only were able to do that on the east side of our ordinance rather than the west side. Because the property owner at the time on the west side was just like, no, don't limit me too much on that. So, and kind of to one of the earlier questions too, as far as championing projects, I probably, alone wouldn't have done this. It did take the community, and if I would have just said, I don't really care about your guys' needs as property owners, this is the gold standard, we should do this, we probably not would have gotten something passed. So that was one of our compromises, is the owners on the east side were like, yeah, this is great. The owners on the west side, not such a fan, but we did end up getting more space on parts of the west side, so the houses are a little farther from the river. But.
Hi, thanks for being here, guys. So I just had a question. I was thinking about it when we were talking about the fertilizer runoff. Are there any efforts to encourage native plants or native types of natural like yards that won't need the fertilizer or won't need extra nutrients put in?
Our code in Lehi does talk about it a little bit. I think that's one of the improvements we can make, especially with some of the guidance we can get from the new legislation. But we do encourage, right up by the river, having native, like parts of, there's this Cold Spring Ranch area plan that's down in Lehi. That one, they did put a little bit more open space, and we're trying to work with them, like, don't put grass right up to the bank of the river. Like, we should hold it back a little bit. So there are spots where we've been working with the developer to leave. They want to do things like, taking out phragmites and Russian olive and that kind of stuff. But to keep some of that native habitat area, that's part of that buffer from the river as well. So it's not like specific footage that we should be doing. It's just saying it's part of, I guess the way our zoning ordinance works is, if you fall within the zone as it's shown on our map, you are then subject to this process. You have to submit a concept plan. And in that concept, you have to identify all these different issues. And then it's somewhat of a negotiation, I guess, working through it. But these are some of the things we're looking after. So that's part of that back and forth that we have. And something I think we can look to in updating our ordinance, maybe get a little stronger on some of that, some of those types of principles. So.
Would you guys be open to considering tax incentives to help new developers or encouraging that among new development across those banks?
Yeah, we've done some incentives in some ways to get more open space, but we've basically compensated with, maybe they get a couple extra housing units in their development, and then it's clustered a little bit farther away. So we've utilized that before. We haven't utilized tax incentives for it before, but I'm sure it's something that our council would be willing to talk about.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I was curious if Galen Bennion could share a little bit more about the details of what's in the proposed legislation that is going to be brought for the state.
Sure. So when Dr. Fulstead-Shaw and Soren approached me when we started meeting, we took this, a presentation about riparian corridors to the Utah Water Task Force. So I've been serving long enough that I know if I'm dealing with anything with water, that's where I take anything. So we took it there way back in May. And they liked this idea and suggested that we started a working group. So we've had a working group with over 50 people involved. And in some of the meetings, we've had different people at different times, but overall, over 50 people. And a wide range of people, as many stakeholders as we could find. And it's been fascinating for me to meet people like Mike and Justin Anderson and learn of the work that they've done. And so this working group came up with 3 goals, and one of them is right here, to have workshops on riparian corridors. We had one earlier at the League of Cities and Towns, their symposium their summit in September. Another goal is to get all of the toolkits. Dr. Shaw's students created a riparian corridor toolkit. And so we're trying to gather all the toolkits and ordinances into one spot. And DNR is going to host that. They're doing a new website, and they'll have a tile there about riparian corridors. And it will be shared in knowledge and work with the Property Rights Ombudsman's office. So if someone's coming about planning or about nature, they will find this and they'll get the support that they need. And then we have this draft bill, and the bill now is public, so you can go read about it. And we presented it in the Legislative Water Development Commission. So if you go to their October meeting, you can find a link to that, to the bill. It's public, and so that's probably the best way to find it, because they don't yet list our sponsored bills yet. And it would say in 5 years, every city and county in our state needs to have their own vision for their riparian corridor within their general plan. And when I was at the symposium, the Utah League of Cities and Towns meeting, and we had this workshop, I met the mayor of Heber, and she said, "Thank you. This is what we need." And if you think about Heber, there are so many different sources and bodies and streams and springs up in Heber. And they're having just a crushing development period. So if they now can get that vision, they're going to avoid so many headaches in 10 years from now. So it just gives a city the ability to say, this is going to be a priority for us for the next 5 years to move this into our general plan, and it's very open. There's a big section of the bill that is may. You may consider herbicides. You may consider how you're going to get utility equipment down there to deal with big trees that have fallen over. You may consider how the vegetation there could create a fire hazard if you don't take care of it properly. But we've had experts involved. I loved that someone from SLCo, one of their staff members, was late joining our discussion, and when he read that bill, he said, "This is a marvelous bill. You've really worked really hard," and it's because of all the experts that we've had involved in the language. And so it's not oppressive in any way to our cities and towns, because it leaves that vision up to them. And it also, we're getting enough support from the state. The Department of Water Resources is giving a half employee without charge. They already got some more funding through the bill that said they need to look at water with their management and development. And so they're going to say, okay, you can have a half employee already. And the Utah Geological Survey said for $15,000 they can map out all of the riparian corridors in our state. No, okay, help us.
No, sorry.
Okay.
What we're hoping to do is put together all of the existing layers that start to tell you where riparian areas are and put them together in one viewer. Sorry. I wish we could map all the riparian areas in the state for $15,000, but
Okay.
that is
That's why I have them here.
a little bit more than we can achieve. But I think getting all of there's a lot of different spatial layers. None are going to be perfect. So one community, one layer might be better, and in another community, another layer might make more sense for helping them identify where riparian areas are. So what we're going to do is build an application, a spatial application, so people can see all those different layers, and we can explain what they are and where you can download the data and kind of the strengths and weaknesses for using them to identify the riparian areas in the communities.
And this is Diane Manuz with Utah Geological Survey. So it's been fascinating to connect with people around our state. And the other thing is that we are asking for one full-time new employee for 5 years. There is a lot of federal funding right now because this really is our infrastructure. This really is prevention of flooding. So Ogden didn't have to do any flood mitigation this last year with all of the water that we had, because they had done the work of protecting their river. And so the river didn't bother them, even in that historically wet year. And so we have one full-time employee for 5 years to help coordinate, answer technical questions, direct people to the right resources. And then I'm still talking with Division of Fire, Forest, and State Lands to see if we need to ask for additional state funding to help with projects. But there are nonprofits doing work. And as we talked about water and this connection, one of the things that we've talked about is how this can connect with Great Salt Lake. So if people that have waterways going into Great Salt Lake are doing this kind of work, it can reduce the species of plants that are going to end up coming into the water near the lake and taking water from the lake. So there's a lot of benefits to this work, even for the Great Salt Lake. Does that answer all your questions about the bill?
Yes, that's great.
So this is a question for the two mics, I guess. Have you done anything to track the economic impacts of your ordinances, such as has been done for the High Line in New York, where there's been tremendous investment associated with the trail corridor? And if you have, then I think those data would be very useful for Representative Bennion.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not aware of any major quantitative efforts to compile data that would back up what we know.
I think if Justin were here, he would have
Yeah.
an answer. So Justin Anderson, the guy with COVID, would be a good person to ask, because Ogden has had huge economic development associated with their river restoration projects. And I had a master's student a few years ago who did a preliminary project looking at that. So if you want to give me your, or I should send it to you, we'll talk, but I can send that report on to somebody.
And so since I've been in close meetings with Justin Anderson and met him once in person, he said it was $60 million for Ogden, $60 million of economic benefit. And there are health benefits for us as citizens that we can never measure. The benefits for us to be able to walk near a stream without having to drive there, with being able to bike there. I've been able to bike to Jordan River now, and you know, that's it's such a healing thing for us to have that and to get out without spending money to enjoy nature.
I might just add to that. I've heard Justin's presentation a couple of times, and it's really good. I'll see if maybe we can get a version of what he presented at the League of Cities and Towns and make that available if anybody here wants it. But one thing that I'll just point out to the question that Cindy asked is, this is talking about general planning. You know, this is the scale of an entire county, an entire city. And it can be difficult to measure what those impacts are when you're talking about an entire jurisdiction. The Ogden project is a very specific project over about a mile, a little over a mile stretch of the river in the downtown. That's an easier one in some ways to quantify because you've got a really defined geographic area. What I might suggest, though, is because we're interested in this around the Jordan River, if any of you are working on projects that are very defined in scope, that we can look at what the economic benefit is, that's really helpful. I know in Salt Lake City, just recently I heard a presentation on the development of Party's Trail and the 9 line through Salt Lake City. Not the 9 line, Party's Trail and the S line streetcar. And, you know, again, that's a really defined geographic area, about a mile in length, and it's easy to kind of quantify investments within close proximity. But those kinds of things we're looking for, and would love to hear if any of you are aware of projects that we should gather data. The Jordan River Commission is a really good, I think, opportunity to try and do that, because we have cities asking, you know, if we can fund this, what can we expect to see? And that kind of data is really helpful to support North Salt Lake or South Salt Lake or Midvale or other communities that are doing this kind of work.
I'd say too, from Lehi's perspective, it's going to be difficult to track that as well, because a lot of it's new development. Is, you know, there's so much development pressure, it may develop one way or the other. It's a little different when you have a redevelopment area that stays pretty stagnant for a while, and you can start seeing new developments coming in after some of this work has been done. So it's a little different. The context might be a little different too, with the way you're looking at the economic impacts.
Okay, I think we have one more question, but our time is really close, so maybe we'll take that one last question in the back. And I want to thank Mike West and Mike Guymon for being here and for teaching us all so much. And then we'll take one more question.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Representative Bennion, and all of you for the important work you're doing. This is really amazing, and there are so many benefits to having, you know, just the space along river corridors for people and everything. I'm thinking a little, maybe a few steps ahead down in the weeds about wood in rivers, and many know me as a beaver person, so I think about wood in the rivers and how rivers, a healthy river and a healthy riparian and floodplain ecosystem isn't just a system that conveys water downstream, right? It conveys materials too, and I think we should all be including what some might call debris, but wood. I feel like that's a disrespectful word for trees, but include wood and like the conveyance of those materials as part of the conversation around riparian areas, because so much of the benefit ecologically and otherwise that you get from a healthy riparian zone comes from the fact that trees are dying and regrowing, and then create the habitat in the stream and in the riparian zone. So of course, maybe that just comes down community by community, but I think it should be part of a broader conversation too, because there's just, yeah, it's like kind of a mess right now.
Thanks everyone for being here.
Yeah, thank you.